Hello friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and today I want to talk about how homesteading is the new home economics. There was a time when every young person in America learned how to cook a meal, how to mend a shirt, or balance a budget. It wasn't just about homemaking, it was about independence. In the 1950s, more than 75% of high school girls were enrolled in a home economics course. Over 60% of households owned a sewing machine. By 2010, less than 10% of schools still offered full family and consumer science programs. And when those classes disappeared, we didn't just lose skills, we lost self-reliance. In the name of freeing young girls from the so-called oppression of homemaking, we created a new type of oppression, one where young families struggle paycheck to paycheck and often lack the skills necessary to feed their families well on a very tight budget. We became dependent on convenience, on corporations, and on a system designed to keep us spending money instead of stewarding our resources the way God intended. Home economics was never a fluff class. It was domestic science, the study of managing a home wisely and efficiently, and these days it's a dying art. The curriculum of a home economics class revolved around 5 principles: planning, production, prevention, price comparison, and resourcefulness. USDA studies from the mid-20th century found that families practicing these principles reduced their total household spending by 25 to 40%. In today's dollars, that's nearly the value of a part-time income earned simply through good stewardship of your resources. Home economics taught us that thrift wasn't poverty, it was power. And honestly, that same practical wisdom is what I love about the sponsor of this week's video, Backwoods Home Magazine and their sister magazine, Self-Reliance. If you've never read it, it's one of the few publications left that still celebrates the kind of self-sufficiency home economics once stood for: growing food, cooking from scratch, and raising a family with common sense. It's not a flashy publication, it's useful, offering real hands-on advice written by people who actually live this lifestyle. And if you like the kind of content that I put out, I think that you will love it. If you check out the link in the video description, you can get 50% off a yearly subscription to either magazine, Backwoods Home or Self-Reliance. And so once again, I really want to thank Backwoods Home Magazine for being a sponsor and a supporter of my channel. We really appreciate it. But back to the video now. By the late 1970s, home economics began to fade from the classrooms in America. Funding cuts, feminism, and the push for more standardized testing slowly pushed out practical life skills from the curriculum in our schools. By 2010, enrollment had fallen over 40% in these home economics courses. And during those same decades, our dependency deepened on the system. The average household now throws out 30 to 40% of its food. That is insane. 68% of Americans eat out at restaurants at least 3 times per week. And less than 25% of adults know how to sew a button back on a shirt. People are more likely to throw out a garment when it loses a button than mend it themselves. And the typical household now carries over $7,000 in credit card debt. When we stopped teaching self-reliance, we didn't just lose skills, we lost resilience. But something is definitely changing in our culture. And the modern homesteading movement, of which I'm sort of a part of, I guess, with this channel, is in many ways home economics reborn. Nearly 2/3 of U.S. households garden in some form. That's up 25% since 2019. I think COVID had a lot to do with that. 40% of Americans now grow some veggies or herbs on their property. And canning jar sales have risen 35% since 2020. We have a whole new generation of people that are preserving food for their families. We're starting to remember what our grandmothers once knew, and that's that real security doesn't necessarily come from having more money, but from knowing how to make more out of what money we already have. As a homemaker myself, I view this as my primary job is to take the income that my husband brings home and to use it as resourcefully as possible. I can save him money by doing the types of projects that you see us doing in this video. And by doing that, our money stretches much further. Every loaf of bread we bake, every shirt that we can mend, and every jar of food that I can preserve, these are quiet acts of independence. The same principles of home economics, planning, production, prevention, and resourcefulness are what fuel the modern homesteading movement that you see happening today. When economists study families who cook at home, the numbers are staggering. Cooking from scratch instead of eating out can save $4,000 to $6,000 per year. And if you guys are interested in learning about how that works for my family, I just finished up last week a series that shows how homemade food saves in comparison to store-bought versions, even the cheapest store-bought versions that you can get somewhere like Walmart. Cooking it from scratch always, pretty much always, is going to save you money unless you're buying things discounted on sale during special times throughout the year. You can check out that series and the playlist of all of those videos in the description of this video. Canning and freezing seasonal produce can cut your food costs by nearly 50 to 70%. Mending and repairing your clothing can save you another $300 to $800 annually. And preventative home maintenance can reduce your overall expenses by 10 to 15%. If you add all of these things together, it's a part-time income. And we used to recognize this value in a knowledgeable and resourceful homemaker. At some point, we stopped valuing homemakers. Little girls were taught that it wasn't enough. This wasn't a valuable pursuit of their time and their future. And they were pushed into the workforce, and we started relying more and more on convenience. And then all of these home economics skills that were once really valued because of how much it saved your money and how much less waste it created of your resources were thrown out of the window. And that's why I think we no longer value homemaking, because people aren't homemaking using these skills that were once taught. The average homemaker is still buying convenience foods and eating out at restaurants every week. The average homemaker isn't mending their clothing and making a lot of things themselves and doing it themselves from scratch at home. And in doing so, not only is the art of homemaking no longer seen as valuable, it's also causing young families to struggle financially because they just aren't doing these things that would save their families so much money. We were never meant to be fully dependent on systems, governments, and supply chains. In 1950, the average American family produced about 25 to 30% of their own food, and today that number is less than 2%. The average American family only produces less than 2% of their food. No wonder we're struggling. But every garden we can plant, every skill we can relearn brings that percentage up again. A well-run home isn't small work, it's foundational work that stabilizes families, communities, and even economies. A lot of the criticism I get on my videos talks about how the things that I do aren't sustainable for the average family. People say it would take them too much time to make their food from scratch and to garden and to grow their food. Maybe they don't have land to grow their own meat sources and protein sources. Maybe they live in an apartment and they don't even have a garden. And so I'm not saying that everyone has to do all of it, but I'm saying all of the little acts and things that you can do really add up. Every bit counts. I have entire challenges that I do throughout the year that show you how just doing a little bit here and there can add up to a whole lot. You don't have to preserve an entire pantry's worth of food every summer, But even just doing a little bit of jam and a little bit of dried beans and cooking up some broth and getting it in jars or in the freezer, every bit counts and makes you that much less dependent on the system that costs your family way too much money. Another criticism I get is that people feel overwhelmed. They don't even know where to begin to learn these skills. Unfortunately, the things that our grandmas and great grandmas did were lost in just a generation or two. And so people find it very overwhelming, especially if the schools aren't teaching home economics, to learn how to do these things themselves or even teach their children how to do these things. But maybe we don't need schools to bring back home ec. Maybe we can bring it back ourselves in our kitchens, in our workshops, and in our gardens. We can learn anything these days on YouTube. There are so many channels out there that are a free resource for you to learn how to do these things and to save your family money. We have blogs that are free to read. We have social media accounts that are providing free information for everybody. And even cheap magazine resources like Backwoods Home Magazine that offer such valuable information to teach us how to bake and can and raise animals and build things ourselves and mend our clothing. And I think this is why homesteading has become so popular, especially since the year 2020. We realized that there was this gap in education for young women and young men. Schools are no longer offering home economics or things like woodshop, and we saw how fragile these systems and supply chains were during the COVID pandemic. And people are now realizing that maybe it would be prudent to learn some of the old ways so that we don't necessarily have to be dependent. So every meal we can make from scratch, every shirt we can mend, every jar that we can put on the pantry shelves, it all adds up. It's all home economics reimagined. I feel like our culture has created a problem where we think buying things are the solution to everything. I see it rampant, not just in domestic things like this, but maybe in the wellness industry, that everybody thinks that in order to achieve health, that there's something out there that they need to purchase that will solve that problem for them. And you see it in every area of life. But maybe the solution to some of our problems isn't in buying the next exercise program or buying the next book about a diet. Maybe it's about what we don't buy. Maybe it's about doing less. Maybe it's about eating less or doing free things. And so we really, as a culture, need to change that mindset of how spending money and making more money is the solution to all of our problems. Maybe it's not about that. Maybe instead it's about doing less or doing more with what we already have. And that is real freedom. I talked in the beginning of this video about how we moved away from teaching young girls these homemaking skills because we viewed them as oppression. We wanted our daughters to have more choices, and I am not against that. I'm raising 4 daughters, and I want them to have every opportunity and to achieve any dream that they may possibly have. And so I work really hard to educate them to meet whatever goals they may have in a career or in their homes, and that includes teaching them home economic skills like the things that I'm showing you in this video. Because home economics, homemaking isn't oppression. What I view as real oppression is living paycheck to paycheck and not being able to feed your family well. I truly think if we can raise up the next generation with these skills, it will help make young families more prosperous in the future. Because real freedom isn't exactly in how much we can earn, it's in how wisely we live with what we have. And when we step out of the machine and start practicing true home economics again, we find something that the modern world can't sell us, and that's peace. Peace isn't something that can be bought. It isn't even something that we can necessarily do on ourselves. It's a state of mind that comes from knowing that you can do it yourself if you have to. And it's using your resources wisely for the glory of God and allowing Him to bless you through that wise stewardship. So I want to encourage you today, if you are a young mother, I want to encourage you to begin learning these skills that will save your family money. They will bless your husband. They will bless your family financially. Start on YouTube. Learn how to cook some things from scratch. Plant some things in a garden next year. Winter is the time to do all those research on all those things, and it's fast approaching. So spend your time over the winter learning the skills that you're going to need for next year. And if you're not a young mother and you're an older mother, I want to encourage you to be the Titus 2 woman that God calls us to be and invest your time into some young families in mentoring them and teaching them these skills that have been lost over time. Teach them how to bake some bread and grow a garden and preserve some food so that you can bless them and their families for generations to come. I hope this video was an encouragement to you. I'll be back next week with more of my typical content, but this was just on my heart to share this week with everything that's going on economically in America right now. Be blessed, friends. We will be back next week. Until then, we will see you later. Bye.